Welcome to the Paranormal M community, where the extraordinary becomes reality. If you're fascinated by all things supernatural, subscribing and enabling notifications is a must. Join us on this thrilling ride into the unknown. Guatemalan worry dolls, and other weird happenings. My wife, a long time ago, used to have night terrors. Some of it may have been due to the fact that she grew up in a legit haunted house. I can testify that shit went on in that house. Anyhow, her father also owned a turn-of-the-century piano, made in like 1910. This will be relevant in a moment, and her mother has all kinds of antique stuff from when her family came to New Mexico in the 1800s. Needless to say, things could have been happening in her house because of all that stuff, or the fact that the previous owner decided to not live anymore and killed himself in the basement with exhaust. Well, as time went by, her night terrors continued and got bad. Her mom decided to use the Guatemalan worry dolls to try to help, I guess. The premise of Guatemalan worry dolls is to put them underneath your pillow and sleep. Afterwards, you place them in a box and bury them on a path you will never go on again. It worked. However, fast forward to right before my daughter's born, my wife and I rented a beautiful house on a hill overlooking the town. After 6 months into living in the house while cleaning, these Guatemalan worry dolls start showing up in random places. Thresholds of the house, odd nooks and crannies, stuff like that. And we weren't entirely sure where they were in fact coming from. Well, my daughter was born, and we remained in the house for another 6 months or so. But as we were moving and cleaning out the house, more dolls kept showing up. Well, we packed them away, and my wife forgot where she put them. As we were moving into a new house, not 2 or 3 days in the threshold of the front of the house, Guatemalan worry doll was lying right there. We'd get rid of old couches and bring new couches in, and sure enough, lift the couch cushions, and voila, worry doll. For a long time, I believe the piano held something in it, because when we brought it with us to the house, shit would always happen. Never in front of me, but definitely behind me. But always in front of my wife and her friends. Lights inadvertently turning on, picture frames swinging on the walls and falling to the ground. Some really funky shit. I started accepting what was happening when it was in my child's room. That pissed me off. I'd come home when no one else was here and sternly tell whatever it was that it wasn't welcome. Reciting the Lord's Prayer in step, we eventually moved the piano out and a lot of things stopped. However, we were telling one of my wife's friends, who's very sensitive to this kind of stuff, that she was really creeped out. But about 3 days after, she was cleaning out her car and called my wife frantically saying, "This is fucked up, you're messing with me." And my wife was confused as shit. You guessed it, worry doll in her center console. Most recently, my wife found one. The scariest thing to happen was the time my wife and I were stoned watching a Netflix comedy special for John Mulaney. A caption came on telling my wife when she was going to die. I thought it was a caption saying when John Mulaney was born, so I didn't even look at what it said, but later on my wife told me what it said. The Blue Boy. I was fairly young, probably about 12 years old. Me and my family were up in Scotland visiting, and on the way back we stopped off in a place called Alnwick, in Northumberland, to visit the infamous Chillingham Castle. My uncle, who lived in Burnwick, upon Tweed, was very much a skeptic of the stories of the castle and claimed he slept there overnight. We got to the doors and my parents paid for the tickets for the tour. On the way in, there were signs saying no flash photography, which I noticed. The tour was amazing, so much history, and especially the dungeons, where they had on display all the instruments of torture that were used in the castle dating all the way back to the 1200s. At one point in the tour, we were walking past one room called the Pink Room, which was roped off, where I saw a blue flash of light inside. I looked at my mother and said to her that I thought people had to go into the room and were taking photos, and that it was naughty as it wasn't allowed. My mother agreed, and we continued the tour. On our way out of the castle, my little sister begged for a book of the castle and its history. My parents gave in and brought her the book. On the way back home, my sister mentioned that there was a section in the book listing all the known ghosts of the castle, one of which being known as the Blue Boy, which is commonly seen as a blue flash or a halo. The owners of the house believe that the Blue Boy is linked to a child's skeleton, which was found hidden behind a wall in one of the rooms in the house during renovation. The very same room I saw the flash. My mother looked at me and said, "I think that's what you saw, son." On the night shift. So I used to work as a security officer. I was asked to work on a Saturday night shift at an old warehouse in Dudley. I turned up at 5 p.m. where the building was a huge brick warehouse with some makeshift offices at the front. I walked in, took the keys from the day officer, and locked the doors behind him. Everything seemed normal for a while. It was a bit creepy as the building was so old, but I was used to that. Around 1 a.m. I got a call from the warehouse manager. One of his night drivers had forgotten his paperwork and asked me to go into the office, right at the back of the warehouse, and collect it for him so that way he could pick it up. I said fine and headed to the office. The warehouse was pitch black. I had a small torch, but only slightly lighting my way. I walked through until I got to the office door, which was a huge metal sliding door. It made a screeching noise as I pulled it open. As I walked in front of me was the office's fax machine, which was blinking and the paperwork was printing out. I grabbed the paperwork, but as I turned around, I looked to the other end of the office and saw what I can only describe as a dark figure hunched over, shivering. I could hear what sounded like breathing, but like if you were freezing cold. I stood there for about 30 seconds motionless, staring at this figure. I turned back slowly and closed the door behind me, rushing back to the front office where I locked the door and waited for the driver. An hour later, the driver collected his paperwork, and for the rest of the night, I'd convinced myself it was just the dark playing tricks on me, but didn't stop me from unlocking the office door or checking the cameras every few seconds. 5 a.m. turned up, and I got a knock on the door from the day officer. I handed him the keys, expecting him to come in, but he locked the door from the outside. I asked him if he was going in. He said he doesn't go inside when there's nobody else in, but sits in his car in the car park and waits. I said, "That's a bit strange." He looked at me and asked if I went anywhere else other than the security office. I told him that I went to the back office to get paperwork for a driver, not telling him about the other part. I never forget the look he gave me or what he said then. He looked me in the eyes and said, "Well, you know why I don't go in there alone then." It gave me the chills, but I shrugged it off and just said, "Okay then," and left for home. Safe to say on the way home I called my office and requested not to go back there. I was being watched by something unearthly. Before I start, I'd like to give you context on the layout of the apartment where I used to live. It was a 3-floor apartment building in which me and my family lived on the 2nd floor. Now, once you get into the apartment, there was a little walkway. You go through the front door and to the right, there's a closet, which couldn't have been any more than 3 feet away from the entrance. You look to your left, and it was a little walkway that couldn't have been any more than 4 feet. You pass the threshold and immediately you're within the middle of the living room and the dining room. This will all be important later in the story. Now, this was back in early summer of '96 on a Saturday night. I was 15 at the time, and I was in the living room with my aunt who was sleeping on the couch while I was laying down watching TV. It was 12:38 a.m. I remember the time because I was flicking through channels. The time was displayed on the top right of the screen. It was dark with only light emanating from the TV. I just so happened to be finding something interesting to watch when I suddenly felt a sense of dread. I tried to shake it off, but it stayed in the pit of my stomach. Minutes after, something told me to look in the direction of the small walkway where the entrance of the apartment is. It was almost as if something forced me to look that way. You know how if you were in class and you were just sitting there minding your own business and you feel like eyes are on you? Then you so happen to turn in direction to the person staring at you? It was sort of like that. Once I looked, I immediately noticed that there was a tall, dark figure over 6 feet staring at me from the shadows. The man was blacker than the shadows that he stood within. I mean like jet black. I did a double take and then squinted under the expression that maybe I was seeing things, but he was standing there watching me. It was like once he's seen me, he was dissatisfied, or perhaps satisfied. It's hard to see his expression, but he slowly turned around and walked past the entrance to the apartment, going straight through the closet. I was utterly shocked as well as terrified when I noticed it. My 15-year-old brain couldn't wrap around what I just witnessed. I sat there still staring in that direction and trying to process the whole ordeal. I snapped out of it quickly, going to the closet to see if anyone was there, but to my horror, there wasn't. The front door never opened, nor did the closet door, which baffled me in utter disbelief. I went and tried to wake up my aunt to tell her about the situation that just occurred. My aunt, groggy from being awakened from her deep sleep, said, "T, you watched too many scary movies. It wasn't real, now go back to sleep." But I assure you that it was absolutely real. The scariest thing of it all is that it almost felt like time stopped, like an outer-body experience. I felt like I was stuck in limbo somewhere. It was like being present in between 2 different realities at the same time. I've had other strange things happen to me, but this one was by far the scariest encounter I've ever had. Mother's Day this year, ghost experience. I went home to Indiana for my 4-day weekend off at work. I visited my mom Friday night and Saturday. Sunday, I stayed at my dad's to visit my stepmom. They live in a state park because my stepmom is the property manager. I slept on a twin bed on the floor, and my daughter slept on a cushion bed on the floor next to me on my right side. She's 2 years old. I woke up in the middle of the night because I heard what I thought was my daughter whining and getting up. I looked over, and it was standing like it was where she already was. Where she was already, and walking to go into another room. I said, quote-unquote, my daughter's nickname. Once I said that, I realized it wasn't her, because she wasn't wearing a gown and it was kind of transparent. It was a white, transparent color. It turned and looked at me. It stared at me long enough that I was thinking, what the heck should I grab? Maybe my phone for a flashlight? So I did. By the time I did that, it vanished. My phone said 3:05. I know I saw what I saw because I wasn't in sleep paralysis, and once I'm awake, I don't see things like this. I wake up at crazy hours for work sometimes. I know what I seen was there. I checked on my daughter because I was worried about her. She was whining in her sleep a bit, but maybe about 2 minutes after my daughter woke up, we went to the kitchen and got her some more milk in her sippy cup. I left the kitchen light on because I wanted a nightlight after this. prayed for my daughter, and then went to sleep 40 minutes after this incident. The next morning, I told my family what I had seen, and they said they had a few experiences there too, but never seen anything. I felt like this little girl didn't mean to show herself to me, thinking I was asleep. Man in my bed. For reference, I could always see or feel ghosts for as long as I can remember. My mother says I was born with a gift, though it sure doesn't feel like one. I was quite young at the time, but sometime when I was in middle school, my mother, dad, and my older sister were at work at the time, as it was pretty early in the morning. We lived in a basement there, which had one room with 2 beds next to each other. Our living room, or rather our living, would be right there as soon as we opened the door. Since it was summer, I had no school, and therefore I was home alone, which wasn't new. I have back problems, so every few hours I had to wake myself up to switch sides on which I was sleeping on. I think it's important to note that there were no windows in the bedroom, so there couldn't be a reflection of anything from outside. The morning went like normal. As I woke, I turned around, and when I opened my eyes to check what time it was before moving, there was a shadow man laying horizontally in the middle of where the 2 beds were connected. At first I thought it was just my eyes playing a trick on me, as I just woke up. So I stayed in the same position, blinking my eyes, trying and thinking maybe that might help. It's safe to say that it didn't help. I stared at it long enough to catch some features. He had a hat on like a cowboy hat and some really pointy shoes. It was like something out of the 1920s. It wasn't exactly a shadow, as I could see all of this. It was like a different shade of black compared to the rest of the room. I don't know how long I stayed there, but he disappeared as soon as I moved my feet. I told my sister when she came home, as it scared the hell out of me. Later, we Googled the house address and found out that there was a fire that burned down whatever house was there before. It didn't say in the article if anybody died in the fire, and we couldn't find anything else on it. But I will say this, the fire happened somewhere between 1920 through 1940. I can't remember the exact date, but with the clothes that he was wearing, it kind of just makes sense. This was the first time I physically saw him, but I've heard his voice multiple times after this. I no longer live in that house, but I just couldn't shake that memory. We saw the same thing, but we didn't know it at first. One night, me and my boyfriend were in bed, and he was already sleeping, and I was watching on my phone. After an hour of watching, he moved and said, "Stop touching my feet, I'm trying to sleep." And I was confused because I wasn't even moving. I just thought that maybe it was our dog. I shrugged it off and continued watching. Fast forward to 2 or more episodes or so in, I decided to sleep. I was sleeping on my side, around 2 to 3 a.m., and I suddenly woke up. Something was telling me to lift my head up and look out the corner of the room. As I did, I saw a large shadow, but I wasn't scared. It was super tall, and I stared at it for a good minute thinking I was just dreaming, because I just woke up and my thought hasn't really processed yet. I was thinking to myself that why that part of the room was so dark. I have my Wi-Fi router there, and it's supposed to be lit up, but it was super dark, and I can make out this tall shadow and its head. I decided to sleep it off and worry about it the next day. My boyfriend woke me up because he was pissed at me because apparently I was moving all around all night, and he hadn't had much sleep. I went to pee, and when I came back I told him, "Hey, I had a really weird dream." He looks at me all confused, and I told him, "Last night, I think I woke up and I saw a shadow here," while pointing at where I saw it. "I saw it too," he said. "I saw it when I woke up, and I told you to stop moving. I was going to tell you, but I don't want you to get scared, so I just ignored it. I asked him what he saw, and he told me I got goosebumps running all over my body. He said it was very tall, but I can't see his body or face. It's like a shadow, and it felt like a man. After that, I told my mom, who was very superstitious, and had my room blessed. I'm not exactly sure what to do with this, but I'm a bit worried. So I live in a 2-story house that was built, I think in 1950 or 1970, somewhere in there. I'm honestly not sure. As far as I know, nobody's passed away in or near this house. I don't think it was built on a gravesite or anything like that. There's definitely been at least 3 different energies or spirits that I've encountered. One was a little boy who would get mad at me if I said a bad word. Well, more disappointed or annoyed than mad. The second was a woman, which I'm not really sure what was up with her. She was just kind of there and was super intense and wanted to get my attention. The third was someone or moreover something. It wasn't bad, but it would observe me, and it would stand at the end of my bed and watch me, so a bit creepy. I haven't talked to or interacted with anything because, 1, I don't want to unlock or bring something to the surface that shouldn't be messed with, and 2, I didn't want to mess with anything that could be demonic or dangerous. So, I was recently watching a few videos of people going to haunted hotels and houses. I was pretty interested in what they did to communicate with the spirits, so I was binge watching a ghost hunting YouTube channel. I accidentally clicked on a YouTube short while scrolling of an edit of Sam and Colby. In the edit, the name was not said but written. It was the name of something demonic, and it started with a B, and it meant something about a demonic spirit or entity that was very powerful. I let out the smallest laugh and said out loud, "I'm so sorry, but..." insert name there, probably Beelzebub. Then I let out a quieter laugh. The second I said the name, a card started moving, a pop-up card that was open. It started to close and open over and over again, and I of course said, "I'm sorry, bye," and then left my bedroom. The way my bedroom's set up is that I'd have to pass by the card to be able to get out of the room. It made me feel even more uneasy, knowing that the AC was not turned on and there was absolutely no airflow in that area. It felt hot and heavy and uncomfy, almost a little choky. So I quickly passed it and left, closing my door. I told my friend about it and they said, "That's weird." I stayed out of my room for a while and went downstairs, but when I came back up I thought, maybe I should go back in. So I went back in, and it had stopped because when I went back over towards the card, it didn't feel as if it did before. It was actually cooler, not heavy, and I didn't feel uncomfy passing by it. I just think it's strange that reaction happened when I sort of mocked the name of a powerful demonic entity. I also want to say, the sound of someone walking up to the door and opening it and nobody being there has happened a lot. Recently, especially at night. And a lot of thumping on my windows also happened. So I don't know what to do. I've never really felt that type of energy in my house before. The area around the card, while it was moving, was weird and gross. I think that's the best way to describe it. Also, I wanted to say the name again. However, I thought maybe don't do that, especially in case it's like a Beetlejuice type thing. I saw a ball of light. This has been many years ago. I was 13. It was at night. I was watching TV with my mom and she fell asleep, so I went to go to the computer as the movie ended. I was 100% awake and fully conscious, not tired. I've always been a night person since I was a little kid. As I entered the room with the computer there, was a ball of light floating in the air. It was a little below my eye level, and it was slowly moving straight from one wall to the other side of the room. I don't remember how it disappeared, if it went through the wall to the other side or just vanished. I was somehow mesmerized, and I was just calmly standing there and watching. I felt calm and peace. When it disappeared, I just normally continued to go to the computer. Just after 15 or 20 minutes, I realized I saw something weird, so I became afraid. I woke up my mom and went back to sleep. It's interesting that I wasn't afraid at that moment, but after I realized it was something weird. There was a camera right in front of me, but I was somehow mesmerized and I just didn't think to take a picture. It was a very light blue, almost white, but it didn't look electrical at all. It was made of milky ethereal light. It was a small ball that was inside and maybe more dense. Well, the inside part was more dense, but then a big ball around it. Just like one thing that you can see through a layer outside. The inside ball and the outside layer were connected by two streams, and the light was slowly moving between them. It was all about the size of a human head, and inside the ball was about the size of a light bulb. I was really 100% awake. Haven't seen anything like it in TV, and I'm 100% sure I literally saw it physically with my own eyes. I've never seen anything like that before nor after. I don't have hallucinations, and I was 13, so obviously I didn't use any substances. Bad memory or something more? So to start this off, I always chalked this up to maybe being a really bad dream, until I asked my older brother about it, and he remembered this incident too. I was probably 4 or 5 at this time, him being a year older. But anyway, we were play fighting in the room that we shared at the time. While I was running away, I ran to jump on the bed, but just before I hopped onto the bed, I felt someone grab my feet and pull me underneath. So from here, the story gets blurry, because what I experienced versus what he saw were two different things. He seen me get pulled underneath the bed, where he pulled me back out. He said I looked unnatural in the way that I fell in. What I remember was not right. I found myself in a dark room, almost medieval looking, but everything was huge, like a room for giants or something. There were 2 weird-looking people speaking a language I still haven't heard to this day. When I noticed that the room I woke up in was my regular room, on my bed with my brother asleep. From that day on, I would wake up and get pulled under by my feet. It happened so much that I resorted to jumping off the bed for almost a year. It finally stopped altogether and never happened since. I don't know what to make of it. Bad memory or just a nightmare? It stopped after that, but my memory was maybe messing with me. Or was it something more? The little girl. I spent most of my childhood in a small town in Pennsylvania, a childhood home that's been long since feeling like a fever dream to me. For as long as I can remember, my family will tell me stories about how a little girl would frequent the halls of my grandfather's home. He would see her peeking around the corner every now and then and hear her footsteps, and hear her giggling from time to time. He was even seen with floating objects from time to time as well. I'd spend most of my summers at his place and would go back home after some time there. One night I woke up, sleeping at the foot of my parents' bed, and I saw a little girl dancing in front of me, spinning in circles with a dress and I couldn't see the color of because it was see-through. I hopped on my parents' bed and hugged my dad while I cried myself silently back to sleep. One night I woke up in my room and I was sleeping on the top bunk, and for some reason I was searching for my sister. I hopped down and looked under the bunk and didn't see anybody there. Mind you, everybody in the house is fast asleep. I look down the stairs and there's only one light on down there, which leads to our dining room. I then see a little girl walk from right to left, past the bottom of the stairs into the dining room. I thought, I found my sister. Let me see what she's doing. I walked down the stairs and into the dining room, and there was nobody there. The kitchen was dark, the laundry room was empty, and the back door was locked. I then went back up the stairs and seen my sister was fast asleep in the bottom bunk the whole time. There's no way she would have walked past me without me knowing. That house was always strange to me because I'd see her from time to time, along with a very tall man who would walk her hallways also. My older sister will also talk about how she'd see the little girl on different occasions, hear her giggles, and see her footprints in the carpet throughout the house. Anyways, my grandfather passed not too long ago. My uncle says that the little girl has been moving through his house. He lived with my grandpa, as if she's looking for something, hearing noises and movements way more frequently than normal. My grandfather passed away in the hospital, and I believe that she's upset that she hasn't seen him again, or that he may never even come home. She's never given us the energy that she's an evil spirit. Maybe she's just a lost soul that enjoys our company. I had a dream about my grandpa. He was with family that passed away a long, long time ago, so I know he crossed over. Rest in peace, Grandpa. I love you. Rock House. I'm a 28-year-old female. The story I'm about to tell you happened back in 2016 with my best friend Chris. Now, ever since the day that Chris and I met, we've always got ourselves in the dumbest things ever. I mean, Chris ran away once and he had my nerves all messed up. But he came back because he had no money. We weren't the smartest teens, but we still enjoyed life. So one summer night, Chris and I were hanging out and we were trying to think of a place to explore, like we always did. And at the time, I told him I've never been to the old Rock House in Greenwood, South Carolina. Now, before I get started, let me give you a little history on the Rock House. A man named Tom Payne Tolbert, built a fireproof house in 1926. The fireproof house was constructed entirely from stone, concrete, glass, and steel. After years of family homes burning down, Tolbert lived in a detached kitchen and used the large house to store family heirlooms. Tolbert lived his later years in isolation. The now crumbling fortress is accessible only by foot, and no one's ever lived inside its walls. You can look up way more about its history online if you like. Now back to the story. I've always been told that the Rock House had many spirits in it and around it, but like I said at the time, I've never been to it. So with that said, Chris and I took my cousin's car and headed out to the old Rock House. I've heard of people going in the daytime, but never really heard of people say that they went at night. We, being dumb, went at night because why not? Ghosts and spirits never bothered me much, so I thought, why not at night? Once we pulled up to the woods and parked on the side of the road, I get the bad feeling run all over my body. I sit there for a moment. I believe Chris sees this look on my face and asks if I still want to do it. Something is telling me not to get out, but at the same time I want to see this place even at night. Yeah, let's go see how scary this place is, I told him. Hell yeah, let's do it, he replied. We get out and start walking through the woods. And as we're walking, we have our phones out for light, and we're making jokes, acting silly like we always do. We can never take anything seriously, no matter what. As we're walking, we don't realize how quiet it is to be in the woods at night, in the middle of summer. We find our way to the front of the house. Chris is in front of me, and we're looking at the house. No front door, no windows. All you can see is pure darkness. For some reason, I just can't move even though Chris is walking to what used to be the door. At this moment, I realize that we're in complete darkness and there are no sounds. No animals, no bugs, no wind or anything, just pure silence. Then out of the corner of my eye, I see something in the top left window. But before I can completely look, I hear something to the left of me and I look over, but I see nothing. Only the darkness. A feeling of dread falls over me, but nothing's there. Chris is now at the door of the house and looks inside. I look at the windows and there it is. Something is there in the window looking down at me. My body turns cold. Those eyes, I'll never forget those eyes burning a hole in my soul. Bright yellow reddish eyes, like fire. All of a sudden I hear Chris say, "Oh, hell no." He turns to run to me, but my body's still frozen. He grabs my wrist and pulls me to run. He never lets me go. As we're running, we're jumping over fallen trees and everything on the ground that people left over time. And as we run, I realize something is running beside us, and I don't dare to look back. My body is now in autopilot mode as Chris has the grip still on my wrist pulling me. My mind's blank and my heart is racing, and at one point I feel like I can feel breath of whatever it is that's chasing us. The moment we make it to the car, everything comes back to me and I'm back in control of my mind and body. We jump in the car and Chris goes to start the car that he has, and he has his face covered by the steering wheel as he tries to start the car, but it's dead. The car is dead. We start freaking out with my head buried between my legs and Chris still hiding his face, and I yell out, "This is it, Chris. This is it. This is how we die. This is how us white people die in movies because we do dumb shit like this." Chris yells back at me, "Shut up, we're not gonna die. The car will start." I can still feel this thing outside of the car. It's just there. Is this why there are so many spirits here? Does it take the souls of people who have been caught to come here? I feel it looking at us. Something wants me to look at it, but at the same time, a voice in my head is telling me no. And I don't want to cry, but I gotta cry. The car starts and Chris tries to speed off. We start going down the road, but then one of the tires blows. We're now on the side of the road again, and we just sit there, not wanting to get out. It's quiet again. The feeling of being watched is still there. Luckily for us, a guy in a truck pulls up behind us. I feel safe right now. The guy pulls over and helps Chris change the tire. I hold my phone as a light with my back to the woods, and I still have that feeling. I want to turn and see what's there, but I dare not to. Something's telling me not to look. After the tire gets fixed, we head to the Huddle House I guess it's close by, and I need to calm down. The poor lady working that night sees something's wrong with us, and with what little money that we had, the lady helps us pay for a meal. The next few days, strange things start happening around my house. For example, I'm in the kitchen fixing something for lunch. My roommate and I are talking like normal, and the cutting board goes flying across the kitchen. She gives me this look like, "See what you just caused? Shit keeps happening for no reason, all because you want to visit haunted places." I pick up the cutting board, and at this point I feel like I need to make things right. I've always been told that if you disturb the dead, that you have to make things right. So with that being said, that weekend I go see some friends who don't live that far from the rock house, and I tell them that I need to go there. So we do. This time it's fully daylight. Once we get there, I still have the feeling, but I don't say a word. Once we get to the house, my friends go in and look around. They explore the place, inside and out. I look to the left of me and see nothing, but the feeling's still there. My body's weak. As I walk and I look in the direction that Chris saw something at. Then I look into the room to the left of me and I see that the room is full of designs and paint all over the room. The whole house is covered the same way. But there's something about this one room. I walk into the room and there's a pentagram with all the markings around it. I walk over to it and examine it closely. I walk around seeing if it's done right. And to my eyes, I see that it is. I yell out to my friends, "Hey, I think somebody tried to summon a demon or something." As soon as the words leave my mouth, something comes crashing down. I nope the hell out of there, and I just start running out of the house, sadly leaving my friends inside, not meaning to. All I do is run through the woods yelling, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." I don't stop until I'm out. My friends come after me wondering what's going on, and I tell them about the other night and what happened as well. At this point, I just want to leave. We all get into the car. Then my friend who is driving goes to start the car, but once again it's dead. Just like the other night, but in a different car. My mind goes back to the other night with this big, dark creature coming to mind for some reason. I never seen it before. Was it the thing chasing us that night? Was it putting itself inside of my mind to scare me more? So many questions. I try my best not to freak out. I called my roommate to come pick us up. As we're waiting, a car pulls up. He must live on this road and knows what happens. He says every time somebody goes to that house, their car's dead when they get back. He helps jumpstart the car and we go down the road. I see my roommate and I just jump out of the car and jump into mine. I speed off as fast as I can, wanting to get as far away from that place as physically possible. My friends meet me at my house and I made a promise to myself to never go back to the rock house. For some reason, Chris and I stopped hanging out. We didn't get into a fight or anything. We just stopped being friends and we never spoke about what happened that night until a few weeks. We both seemed to have forgotten that night. I called him and asked him what it was that he saw inside that house to make him do what he did. He doesn't remember what he saw, but he remembers the night. I thought I wouldn't forget, but I did until a few weeks ago. Someone told me that a brain will block out something so traumatizing that you won't remember that it even happened so you can live your life like normal. Maybe that's what our brains did for us, so we won't live in fear forever. Now it's 2023, now that I remember that this story is recent to a few friends of mine at work, and a person told me that they want to go visit the rock house. I told them no, they don't, but they really want to, not believing in ghosts, and they've never really experienced anything ghostly. So I said, go if you want, but I promise you, I won't be going back to that place ever again, and once you do, you won't go back there either. The witch that used to live behind me didn't scare me as much as whatever was in the woods that night. Yes, a witch used to live on the property behind my house. I think I accidentally opened a portal in my home. So let's go back to when I first moved into my house just over a year ago. There was nothing in this house. I know that for a fact. My nan was a medium. She checked the house and it was all clear. And I also have some empathetic abilities. So I can usually feel when there's something going on, and I got nothing from this house. After my nan passed away, a few ago, I noticed more and more happenings in the house, but it didn't feel like it could have been my nan visiting. It started off with little things here and then, a couple little taps throughout the house, but over the past couple months it's been more active, and there's a very dark energy lingering in my spare bedroom. Once again, it didn't start off very strong, but it's been getting stronger and stronger over the past few weeks. More activity, setting off motion detectors, and just like the feeling when you go into a spare room is horrible. There's something bad in there and it's getting stronger. I've been racking my brain trying to think of what I brought into the house that I might have attracted it, maybe brought it in. I've done multiple cleansing rituals, but it hasn't gone away. It seems to just be pissed off that I'm trying to get rid of it. Even going so far as to hide my sage stick, so I had to buy a new one yesterday. I was talking to my sister on the phone yesterday about all of this. We got around to the subject of mirrors and how having two mirrors directly facing each other can create a portal. She asked me if I had any mirrors facing each other in my home, to which I said, no, I don't think so. Then it hit me. I went to check the spare room, and as it turns out, I do. I have some wardrobe doors with mirrors on them, but I haven't put on the wardrobe yet, and I've just leaned them up against the side of the wardrobes until I got around to fixing it. The mirrors are directly facing each other, and they're in the spare room where the dark energy lingers. I'm thinking I should just move the mirrors and cleanse the house again, but is there anything else I should do to make sure it's definitely gone? My ghosts hate my morning alarms. So I've been semi-aware of something, quote-unquote, in my house for a little time now. Usually just taps here and there, noises throughout the house, strange feelings, and something setting off my motion detector when nobody's home. Lately, though, I've discovered that whatever is in my house doesn't like my alarms going off in the morning. The first experience was with I guess it was a couple weeks ago. My alarm had been going off in the morning, but I hadn't woken up properly until I heard an irritated voice say my name as if to wake me up because my alarms weren't doing the job. The second time, same thing again, alarms going off, but I wasn't getting up. And then I heard something hard fall on the floor in my bedroom. I got up to investigate, but nothing was on the floor at all. The latest one was the other morning. I'd snoozed my alarms a few times because, I guess they attended to write alarms. I snoozed my alarms a few times because I couldn't be bothered to get up. And when I finally did wake up properly, I realized that I hadn't heard any more alarms. I went to grab my phone only to discover it had been taken off charge and thrown across the room, too far away to just have vibrated off the side table. Is this something I should worry about? Basically, one day I was just sitting at home chilling in my bedroom watching YouTube. Then I needed to use the toilet, so I opened my door, and the minute I stepped into the hallway, I felt this deep chill, as if someone poured something cold onto my back. I stood in the hallway motionless, and my insides told me I needed to run back into my room, so that's exactly what I did. I sat in my room completely still, waiting for the feeling to go away. It eventually went away sometime around 12 p.m. Can someone please tell me what happened, and if I should worry about it? Update. I was sitting in my house again, reading a comic, and then I got up from the couch and began to go upstairs, as that was where my bedroom was, when I heard my mom call out my name and told me to come upstairs. Except her voice sounded wrong in a way that I can't explain. I almost did, but then I remembered my mom had died when I was 3. With the most calm voice I could really make, I said, "No," and left the house. She started screaming and yelling the phrase, "Get upstairs, it's too hot." About 3 times before, she subtly started calling my name again. I'm currently sitting outside at a park in my complex. Doesn't even feel like my complex. There's multiple things different about it. For example, there are no trees at all. There's no buildings. And there's more storm drains than there were supposed to be. I want to move away, but I'm only a minor and I don't think my father would believe me if I told him this story. What should I do? Waking precognitive dream/vision. The vision or waking dream, or whatever you want to call it, happened in the summer of 2004. I was driving home from work on a route that I could drive with my eyes closed. I was so used to it. When my mind began to wander, I saw me and my husband going into my stepdaughter's room and finding her hanging in the closet. I was a paramedic at the time, so I saw myself performing each step involved in the beginning of the process of CPR. My husband was hysterical. I knew that 911 had been notified. I just kept focusing on performing CPR, thinking about the crew who's about to get the call. And then I snapped out of it, and I felt awful for thinking such a horrible thing about her, like I had fantasized about what was happening. and wanted it to become real. No way did I feel that way. Almost exactly a year later, it actually came true. All of it. We went to check on her and noticed her CD player was skipping and she wasn't fixing it. We went into her room and ultimately found her hanging in the closet. My now ex-husband begged me to save her, so I took a deep breath, pried her mouth open and began CPR. As I performed CPR, another person who happened to show up right as I was running downstairs for the phone actually ended up being the one who was talking on 911, replaying everything I told her to relay. We never spent another night in that apartment. We stayed in the same complex, but we stayed with family while we were waiting for them to get our new apartment ready for us. That was on 9/3/2005. I still wonder if there have been any paranormal experiences in that room. I had a visitation dream a couple weeks later. That was really sweet. I felt awful for having thought it. Then when it came true, it felt even worse. It's not the only prophetic experience I've had, though. An entity grabbed my legs. To preface this, I, a 29 female, live in a home built in the 60s with my mom, a 51 female, and roommated with a 62-year-old female and my husband, 38-year-old male. Our landlord's father passed away not too long ago, and things have been going on since we had our bathroom remodeled. A year ago it was small things, items being thrown, hushed whispers heard at any time of the day, and a shadow of a child seen in a few rooms. Last month, we had the master bathroom remodeled, as it was causing structural damage to the house, and things have been crazy ever since. The first night after the remodel, I could smell someone smoking right in the living room. Granted, our roommate smokes outside and doesn't ever smoke in the house. The smoke smell would follow me into the bedroom, where it would feel like someone was standing over me, constantly blowing cigarette smoke into my face day and night. Then it led into me not being able to walk into my bathroom without letting the air know that I was coming in. Because if you don't, whatever it is in there gets so angry that the air gets heavy. The day I was grabbed, it was roughly 4 or 5 a.m. since I worked the night shift, and I was trying to go to bed. I was laying next to my husband when I felt a rope or a tail wrap around my left knee, then switch to my right. I was so scared I ended up smudging the whole home, salting the doorways into and out of the house, and putting salt on the 3 mirrors in the bathroom. I don't have any spirit board or anything like that to communicate with on the other side, and I don't want to. There's still hushed conversations happening, but I don't smell smoke anymore, and nothing has ever tried to touch me since. I went through a glitch in the Matrix on the London Tube. This happened in 2015 on the Piccadilly line in the London Underground. If you're not familiar with it, you might want to get a map of it. So I was just going home after seeing a friend's concert in North London, and at the time I lived around Dollis Hill in Northwest. I was traveling back with a friend of mine and we were both extremely sober. I only had a small beer at the start of the evening and drank water during the event. I hadn't smoked nor taken any sort of drugs, nor have we ever been psychiatric patrons. It was sometime after 11 p.m. and we were a bit concerned about the underground closing up, so we were trying to figure out the best route. As we approached King's Cross Street and Pancreas STN, we decided that maybe it would be best for us to change with the Jubilee line at Green Park, only to change ID at the last second. We got up from our seats toward the exit, and the train door closed right in front of us. Not a big deal. We decided to get off at the next station, Russell Square. as it was a small station, and it would have been easier after all to go back to King's Cross, where we had more chances to find trains still running. So we wait a few minutes for the train to get to the next stop. The monitors on the train and the voice over the speaker telling us that that destination will be the Heathrow Airport. The train reaches Russell Square, its name spelt out in the ceramics that decorate the walls. The doors open right in front of the short corridor leading to the staircase where the man is mopping the steps in preparation for closure. We go over the bridge and wait on the platform, right in front of the billboard advertising David Bowie's latest release. I believe it was his last of his compilation albums. The monitor tells us that our train is only 2 minutes away and will terminate at Cockfosters. As usual, my friend and I can't help but chuckle. The train arrives, we both get in, doors close behind us. A couple of minutes go by and I can't help but notice the people with their luggage. That for whatever reason, they didn't seem like they were coming back from the airport. The monitor says, "This is the southbound train to Heathrow Terminal 1, 2, 3, and 5. Must be some kind of mistake. So why is the recorded voice announcing the same? And why is it saying the next stop is Russell Square?" My friend and I are a bit confused, so we ask a couple with luggage for their destination Heathrow. They must be on the wrong train and the computer system must have somehow fucked up. There's no other explanation. We wait patiently for our train to get to King's Cross, St. Pancras. However, as the light starts coming in from the windows, we can't help but notice the same ceramic patterns of Russell Square, its name spelt on the wall. Once again, the door opens in front of the same corridor and the same guys cleaning the stairs. I swear he glanced at me in a way that made me clear that he'd seen me already. Once again, we're greeted by David Bowie's face, and once again, we get on a train to Cockfosters. Only this time, we're not thinking about juvenile puns. We manage to both get home safely in complete disbelief, but sure that we've had the same experience. Nobody's ever been able to give an explanation of what happened. And I've done again the same route to find that it's perfectly okay. Shadow person follows us. My husband and I have been together since we were 16. We're now 24 with 2 kids, and this all started before I met him. His stepmom came into the picture when he was around 13, and brought with her my husband described as a satanic book. Gave everyone the creeps, and my significant other's dad decided to burn it, which resulted in ear-piercing screams when it hit the fire. After that, they started experiencing strange activity, such as items being moved. The most unexplainable was a laundry hamper that was found at the top of their roof. His sister also had an experience of being woken up to a black figure hovering over her, choking her. Her boyfriend at the time witnessed this. When my husband and I got together, I spent many nights with him. I always had a bad feeling over there, but what changed me from a skeptic to a believer was when I placed my phone on a TV stand, and not a minute later, my significant other watched my phone fall from the ceiling, the corner of the room. We moved into our first apartment together in 2018. Whatever it was followed us, and the activity went from sparse to almost daily. Unexplained footsteps, items not being where they should be, cabinets opening and slamming shut, doors opening and closing. We moved in 2019 and we were followed by this entity again. Nothing about the hype of activity changed, but this is when it started showing itself to us. The first time my husband and I were relaxing on the couch, which faced towards our dining area. The kitchen was behind the wall where we had our TV set up. I'm not sure what compelled me to stop our conversation and look in that direction, but what I saw chills me to this day. Peeking out from behind the wall that separates the living room and the kitchen was a shadow figure of a tall man. It stayed long enough for me to get a good look at it and know without a doubt it wasn't my imagination. As soon as I noticed it, it pulled itself back behind the wall. During the moment, I was more curious than afraid and pursued it. There was nothing in the kitchen. When I think about it now, I wonder just how many times that this thing was spying on us. Why would it pull itself back into the kitchen instead of disappearing right then? Did it want me to follow it? Shortly after this incident, my daughter was born. The activity got worse again. It became a nightly occurrence that her door would open by itself. This also happened during her naps. Not only was my husband now seeing this figure too, but it started touching us and being vocal. One night while laying in bed, I dropped my phone off. While leaning down to grab it, I felt a hand stroke my arm. I'd also often feel like my husband was getting in bed with me and hear breathing in my ear, only to roll over and find myself alone. My husband also had his foot grabbed one night while playing video games. Night was when the most activity happened. Our daughter was waking up screaming over 20 times a night. Her doctor said it was the worst sleep regression she'd ever heard of. We moved again in 2021. Our very first night being there, I was unpacking the kitchen while my husband was putting our daughter down for bed. I turned around to see a huge shadow of a man go from one end of the kitchen to the other and disappear. Another night we were woken up to banging on our walls, which faded out into tapping. This was a wall that separated our room from our daughter's room. My husband decided to tack back. The tapping would repeat every pattern my husband did. We let our daughter sleep in our room that night, and when we woke her up, she pointed to the doorway and told us that there was a man. We moved in 2022 to our current residence, and I'm not sure what's changed, but the activity comes and goes now. Sometimes there'll be a little bit of activity for months, and then it's a rush of seeing figures, doors opening and closing in front of us, etc., etc. I can say that this activity does pick up during stressful times. Our daughter's now 4 and will occasionally bring up the shadow that visits during the night. Something has been following me almost my whole life. When I was 10 years old, I had very strange experiences. I think I brought something back with me. When I, a 44-year-old female, was a child, I would have strange experiences almost every night. As an adult, I'm still scared of the dark. I lived in the American Southwest. It began as constantly feeling like I was floating above my body at night. Sometimes I would see faces floating above me. Other nights I would sleepwalk, especially when there was intense thunderstorms. Still happens. And when I was 10, during a thunderstorm, the following happened. I woke up to an intense crash of thunder. My room was dark, and my younger sister, 6 years old, had woken up as well and had fallen out of bed. I helped her get back to bed and laid back down in mine. I was having some trouble falling back asleep because it was hot and semi-humid. Suddenly, everything got extra dark in my room and the air became very heavy. I tried to get up and yell for my parents, but I suddenly couldn't move. I could hear voices calling to me in the dark and almost thought that I could see something coming at me through the darkness. I closed my eyes to not look at it, and then I felt a very cold air blowing on my face. I opened my eyes, and the only way to describe it is that it looked like I was traveling at light speed through a wormhole tunnel. I freaked out, of course, closed my eyes and tried to scream, but nothing came out. The wind stopped, and when I opened my eyes, I was laying down still, but like nothing was supporting my body that I can recall. I was just floating in this dark void that was also illuminated at the same time. Suddenly, these tall white beings began to float towards me. Some of them began trying to talk to me, but I didn't understand them. Then more and more of them began showing up. They were transparent and tall, similar to the beings at the end of The Dark Crystal. I didn't watch that movie until I was 13. Imagine how badly that freaked me out. 2 of the beings began to touch my head while talking to me and each other. I tried to scream again and close my eyes, but when I opened them, I was back to the wormhole tunnel. This time I could tell I was traveling faster and I was very, very cold. I blinked and suddenly felt like I was back in my room. I began screaming for my parents. I was scared and freezing. There was ice in my hair. My parents came rushing in and I was understandably very upset. My mom was pulling ice out of my hair. My dad was just staring at the ice like he knew something but didn't want to say. They managed to calm me down and tuck me back into bed even though my hair was sopping wet. 80s parents. My parents were obviously freaked out too, even though they tried to hide it. In the hallway, I heard my dad say to my mom that it was 88 degrees in the house and it didn't make sense that my hair was frozen the way it was. My mom wondered if I've somehow gotten into the big freezer, and my dad laughed. Then they went to bed, and I eventually fell asleep too. The next day, my mom wouldn't talk to me. I was scared still and also curious about what happened. I finally got a chance to talk to my dad about it, and he told me that he believed I somehow traveled to another plane of existence. Then he told me even though we all grew up Catholic, there were 10 levels our souls must pass through before we reach heaven. Essentially, he said he believed in reincarnation. He said every time we die, our souls go up one of these planes. If we were a good soul, we return as a better, kinder person, becoming better and kinder with each return. If we're bad souls, we return bad and worse until we become evil, eventually as we progress through the 10 levels. We do have a chance to turn things around, but that's essentially why we had a really horrible, i.e. Hitler, and very good people, i.e. Mother Teresa. In our current plane of existence, that is. He believed that I traveled to one of the other planes where souls were waiting to come back. The white beings I had seen were good souls protecting me from the bad ones. I'm sure I believed him at the time. My mom just told me to pray and to still refuse to talk about it. I asked my parents about this last year, as they're both still remember that this happened. Since that happened, I've noticed that when people treat me poorly, bad things begin to happen to them. But it also works the opposite way. When people are nice to me, their life vastly improves. There are unfortunate side effects to the bad ones. Every time something bad happens, I'm plagued with bouts of sleep paralysis, nightmares, and night terrors. I don't find out about the bad things until after. During the sleep paralysis, I've heard a disembodied voice tell me that they are making sure things are set right, quote unquote. I've also heard it say, "Don't worry, they're paying for what they did." I never wish bad things on anyone, even people that have hurt me or wronged me. I've always shied away from confrontation, but this presence has always made them pay. It also has made bad situations good for other people that are kind to me. It's told me very vivid dreams about how it improves their lives. I could give many examples of this, and it only seems to apply to non-family members, and also to people that maybe really didn't intend to hurt me or make amends. Like one bad encounter won't cause any problems, especially if it was unintentional. I don't know how to deal with it though. It's hard to explain. I hope I at least gave enough information on what's going on.